Today we're going to talk about Italian Iron Age culture. The slides and text were prepared by Anne Glennie. The presentation is being done by Andrew Carroll. The Iron Age culture was first identified in excavations during the 19th century, roughly from 1853 to 1855, at the Italian city of Villanova in northern Etruria, here with the star. Because this earlier culture seems so different from the subsequent Etruscan civilization, excavators and scholars dubbed it the Villanovan culture. The Villanovans were treated as a completely distinct culture from the Etruscans, whom these scholars believe took over Italy when the Villanovan culture died out. Peoples of other sites who likewise exhibit these defining practices were also called Villanovan. Nowadays, we usually just refer to this period and these practices as the Iron Age or Iron Age culture. The Italian Iron Age spans the period from roughly 1000 to 700 BCE. Now, there's a good note here that the time period categorization is imposed on ancient cultures by modern scholars. No ancient person simply just woke up one morning and said, it's 700 BCE, time to leave the Iron Age and switch to the Orientalizing period. 1000 to 700 BCE are good general dates for the Iron Age, but close study of individual sites will show that the practices which we as modern analysts mark as Iron Age were exhibited both before 1000 BCE and after 700 BCE. In addition, Iron Age practices certainly did not fall immediately out of use after 700 BCE, and most sites which have occupations spanning what we identify as the Iron Age and Orientalizing periods will display overlap in the use of Iron Age practices. Think of, for example, how your family might use your grandparents' china, or how vintage clothing styles continue to become popular. Most important Etruscan sites, such as Tarquinia and Verucchio, had an Iron Age population. And rather than see the Iron Age population as a group of people totally different from the Etruscan population of these sites, modern scholars see them as the same culture. The Etruscans did not, therefore, conquer or destroy the Villanovans, but grew out of them. The Iron Age people of ancient Italy are simply early Etruscans. As previously mentioned, the Villanovan or Iron Age culture is defined by a number of distinct practices. One of the principal qualities identified by excavators at Villanova was based on burial practices. They excavated a number of urn fields filled with funerary, which is another word for ash, urns, and found this a defining principle. Just as with the discussion on the generalization of Iron Age dates, we should be careful about assuming that every single Iron Age person was cremated and buried in an urn. Inhumation burials have also been excavated in Iron Age cemeteries. Furthermore, there is a belief that cremation burial in urns probably represented only the elite of the Iron Age population. Wood was somewhat scarce in the ancient Mediterranean, and it would have been expensive to amass the quantity needed to achieve the heats to incinerate a human body. Additionally, though the ceramics containers used as urns would have been relatively cheap and available, urns are frequently buried with grave goods, including metal objects. Metal was another somewhat rare material and could be melted down and reused. The fact that a person could be buried with metal and thereby remove it from circulation is a display of wealth. Another facet of the Iron Age is the use of coil-made or hand-built ceramics, as exampled up here in this image that the cursor is circling. While the pottery wheel had been invented and was in use elsewhere, this innovation had not yet been imported or discovered in Italy. All pottery was constructed using the coil method. Think first aid art class. And smoothed out using various tools. Because this technique is by nature imperfect, so coil-made or hand-built ceramics can be identified by their uneven walls. You can see how it gets thin and then thick and then starts to thin out over here. Iron Age artifacts are decorated with geometric designs using linear patterns and shapes. Even human figures, when they appear, are represented as stick figures or block people. As is implicit in its name, the Iron Age is characterized by the working of iron and bronze metals. You can see here a fragment of an iron knife. But despite the use of this new technology, stone was also still worked into tools. Here we have a flake of chert. Finally, architecture of the Iron Age consists primarily of oval-shaped huts, built from wood, insulated with mud, and roofed with thatch. Terracotta roofing systems did not come into use until the Orientalizing period, though hut architecture was still utilized then as well. There are two primary typical forms of funerary urns. The first is the biconical urn, so named because the larger ceramic vessel looks like two coins joined together at their bases. The vessels themselves were initially used as water pitchers and had two handles. In order to mark the vessels as urns, one handle was broken off. You can see the lack of a handle here. And in later instances, when the form was made specifically as an urn, only one handle was created. A bowl served as the lid to the urn. These bowls often had two handles, and likewise, one handle was broken off. Both the urn and the bowl were decorated with geometric designs. Some scholars believe that these geometric patterns reflect the types of patterns represented on woven textiles, and therefore represent a sort of burial shroud. Some of these urns have furthermore been discovered with remnants of textiles around them, especially at waterlogged sites such as Verucchio. Strengthened in this theory, it was necessary that these urns should be shrouded in some way. The other type of urn, seen here, is the hut urn, which imitates the oval huts in which Iron Age people lived. They, compounded with archaeological excavation of hut foundations, therefore provide us with good descriptions of what these huts must have looked like. Hut urns also represent the earliest identified form of what scholars call the House of the Dead. Burial forms in the later Orientalizing and Archaic periods often also reflect the architectural practices of the time. This representation of the pottery, of the repository for one's remains as the contemporary domestic space seems to suggest that Iron Age and Etruscan peoples viewed the afterlife as a continuation of their lives on Earth. You live in a hut on Earth, therefore you need to live in a hut in the afterlife. Here we have some examples of Iron Age ceramics. As previously mentioned, they were entirely built by hand using the coil method. No pottery wheel needed. You can see in these examples the walls of uneven thickness and uneven heights. So here we have uneven thickness along the side here, and then here you can see the lip of this vessel kind of making a small wave pattern. Another Iron Age ceramic typology includes knob handles, seen here, although regular lug handles were still employed. Here are some examples of Iron Age designs on ceramics. On the left are concentric circles, or bullseyes, which could be created by stamping or by incising. So here we see the two stamping. On this side, we can see swastikas, or the double swastika, which were very popular not only in Italy, but also in the wider Mediterranean. Found here in the little fragment right there. Other Iron Age designs include hatch patterns made by incisions, up here, or by rolling a stamp, as well as also popular were triangles made through incisions, as seen over here. Both iron and bronze were worked in the Iron Age. Here we have an iron knife, and we also have a bronze arrowhead. And on the right, we have two examples of fibulae, the pins which were both decorative and used to fasten clothing. On this slide, we have several examples of worked stone tools. Notice the convex patterns formed from the percussion of striking a stone with another stone to form a blade. You can see the convection going there and here, in the center one. As previously mentioned, this older technology was not forgotten or neglected following the advent of metalworking, so it can be found in later ages, but predominantly is found in Iron Age contexts. Finally, Huts were the most common architectural form during the Iron Age. In order to construct them, a foundation was cut into the soil or bedrock several feet deep. A frame was constructed with timber and coated with mud. Here we see the frame, and we have to imagine this terracotta vessel. Instead of having the clay on the wall, we would have had mud filling in these walls spaces here. A coat of mud or plaster was added to insulate the structure. The roof was constructed out of thatch, thin branches woven together, from thin branches and reeds woven together. Foundations of huts have been excavated most successfully at San Giovanale, where several phases of construction are visible, as evident by the overlapping foundations. On the right is a reconstruction of the framework and its analogy in the form of a hut urn. There are many important Iron Age sites, but we will just examine one today, Verucchio. Like Villanova, located up here near Bologna, Verucchio is in northern Etruria. It is so fantastic because the site itself was waterlogged, which led to the preservation of materials which don't normally survive, including wood and cloth. Verucchio also exhibits evidence for long-distance trade in its prevalence of amber artifacts, which were imported from the distant areas of the Black Sea, the body of water north of Turkey. Verucchio is also significant because it exhibits the typical Iron Age practices and typologies well into the 7th century, after Iron Age practices had faded at other Etruscan sites. One of the most well-known artifacts from Verucchio is the Verucchio throne. Its shape reflects a form which is known from terracotta thrones which survive. It is highly decorated with carvings and bronze studs. The carved pattern seems to represent the activities of a community, including women weaving on a large stand-in loom. The survival of this throne with its weaving scenes is especially lucky at a site also known for its surviving woven artifacts. Perhaps too much evidence has been placed on the importance of weaving at Verucchio due to this accident of archaeological record. But there are also many ceramic and amber tools related to weaving at Verucchio. It is possible to tentatively identify it as an important weaving site, though it is also possible that in a time before mass production, weaving was equally important and prevalent at all ancient sites. It's just not well preserved at all of them. Like the Verucchio throne, the Verucchio tintinnabulum is a bronze artifact which preserves weaving scenes. The top register, 2 women work on a large upright loom, while in the bottom register, down here, women spin raw wool into thread for weaving. Notice how the woman on the left sits in a chair with the same form as the Verucchio throne, seen on the previous slide here. On the right is a pixelated image of one of the woven textiles recovered in excavations at Verucchio. You can see the pattern of squares similar to what modern plaid looks like. As mentioned above, Verucchio is also famous for its beautiful amber artifacts. Here are a few examples. The top one here is an amber bead. This amber artifact here and these 2 over on this side are amber fibulae. And the central object is most likely a elaborately decorated belt buckle. So in conclusion, the important things to remember about Iron Age practices are the following. That Iron Age people predominantly practiced burial through cremation. Coil-made or hand-built ceramics were almost the only way to make pottery. These pots were decorated with geometric designs. There was a lot of iron and bronze working. Stone tools were still prevalent throughout the Iron Age, and simple oval or ovoid thatched roof huts were their primary domestic spaces. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below in the comments section.